everyone, and welcome to PR News Live. I'm Nicole Schumann, Senior Editor at PR News, and I'd like to thank you for joining us again today. As always, if you have any questions throughout the chat, just pop them into the comments and we'll get to them. And today I'd like to welcome our special guest, Diane Anderson-Minshall, CEO of Pride Media. Diane is an accomplished writer, speaker, and LGBTQ+ leader, also serving as current editorial director at Out, the Advocate and Plus magazine. And she was also named the first ever female CEO of Pride Media in 2020. So welcome, Diane. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'd like to chat about an article we featured yesterday in PR News regarding companies and their commitments to publicly support sustainable practices. As you know, this week the UN released a sobering report about climate change. And so our writer decided to put some thoughts together in terms of sustainability and what companies should be doing in terms of green communication. Now, I know sustainability isn't your exact wheelhouse, but the dimensions of committing to a progressive cause are probably similar for many organizations. So what do you see as a first step for a brand or organization to take when committing to a cause?
Yeah, well, I can actually speak, both to sustainability and the cause overall. I mean, we want to see it first in your organization. So, at this point, don't just give money to the cause, but, show how you're doing sustainable issues. For us, for example, when I travel, I buy carbon offsets. I look for hotels with green initiatives. Our editor-in-chief of Out Traveler, who I happen to be married to, is focusing on regenerative travel, actually, which is where you go make the place better when you leave it, doing stuff for locals, volunteer activities. Corporations can do that so much more than we can. So we need businesses sort of to step up, become activists in all these different ways. So, and some of these things can be, very easy and very, easy to implement and easy to do. So, on sustainability, our magazines are printed on recycled post-consumer materials. We embrace remote work really early on. And we're keeping a remote first workplace. Everybody has just had a year and a half of practicing how to do remote work. Like, do we really need to go back to those long commutes and resource, struggling things? And then we also share the indigenous land that we live on. So we're on Shoshone-Bannock land here where I'm talking to you now. And that actually is an important thing to show because indigenous folks like myself are impacted by, environmental racism more than other folks. So anyway, I think for a company, they really have to think hard about, showing what they're doing and starting both internally with inside the company and then taking it larger. But it's no longer okay to just do what we used to be able to get with. I love that you call the report sobering. It's really the harbinger of doom. So I think that, this is a time where everybody should be thinking about sustainability. I know we're thinking about it, one of the things, though, that worked for the LGBTQ movement, and when I say that, actually, I think it was more gay and lesbian. But one thing that did help the queer movement was we sort of had this movement that was around, somebody who's gay or lesbian, like you love somebody already who's gay or lesbian, you just didn't know it. And then kind of showing, it just didn't happen with bi plus and trans folks. We really pushed gay and lesbian couples. But that was from the 90s up until marriage equality. That was really this sort of insidious activism campaign that worked to get marriage equality on the background, was that somebody impacted by this, somebody who is this. And I wonder if we could do that with climate change on like different levels. Like, for example, I live on a 20-acre farm and I know farmers and I'm in an area where a lot of people don't believe in climate change or don't believe we have any impact on it because I'm in a rural area. But I'm wondering, if you were to talk to a small farmer about how he was doing and him talking about how he is impacted by climate change, other farmers would definitely listen to him. So I think that on a PR, on a broad company level, it'd be like a way push that would work for each company to be pushing that message around sustainability and what they're doing and what they can do, as long as they are doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they should be doing something at this point. Everybody should. But I feel like, learning from the other movements that's happened is we ask you to look first at yourself. So look at your own company. That's the same thing with rainbow washing. We're asking you, look at your own company. Do you have employee, 50% LGBTQ employees are not out at work. They don't feel it's safe to be out at work. That's an astonishing number. Why aren't your employees safe to come out at work? Do you have employee resource groups? Do you have allyship, true allyship? Are those people making it to the top? If not, that's part of your problem. And then going beyond that to what are you doing in the public sphere about, in terms of like helping, LGBT causes? Are you painting, are you slapping rainbows on a t-shirt and then, and then calling that allyship, but at the same time, using your sort of deep pockets to give money to anti-gay politicians, for example, or anti-trans politicians. So I think that's, I think that corporations can be really powerful allies using their privilege and deep pockets to do real work, like for the LGBTQ community, for the sustainability movement, all those kinds of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point and a great tactic as well. A lot of people are, and it doesn't really depend on what the issue is. You look at COVID right now and the vaccine, and a lot of people, nothing really affects them until it happens to them. So bringing in someone who is actually experiencing something that you might actually experience in terms of what you were saying, the example with the farmers, is a good way to bring in a story and a narrative that other people might refer to or might agree with. So I think that's a great tactic right there. And to follow up, a lot of people are looking at authenticity. A lot of people are looking at the statements that brands put out last year in terms of diversity, and are they following up with them? Some are, some aren't. So what's a good way for brands or organizations to continue to communicate their progress to followers and onlookers? I'm sure you guys and some of your journalists are looking out for this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, if we're going to use LGBT marketing as a specific example, I think that, again, you need to be in it. Pride 365. That's like a term that our Stuart Brockington, our VP of ad sales and partnerships, coined a long time ago, and we kind of go to market with it. That Pride isn't just June. It's just not that 1 year. It's year round. So to really engage in true allyship, you can't just because rainbow washing really allows people in governments to that don't do tangible work for LGBTQ rights or LGBTQ communities at any other time of the year to sort of like slap a rainbow on something and for the month of June and call it allyship. But that's really, it's really not what it is. So I think that showing the real work that the company is doing, I can think of, and it's inside and outside the company. So if you think of, Mondelez, which has Oreos. It's not a client of mine, so I'm being genuine. They do amazing advertising that has social good for LGBTQ people. Their video of the girl going home with her girlfriend and the reluctant father eventually coming around and showing his support, not by words, but by painting a fence rainbow colors, was really on target. And I've talked with so many people. It did not tell you to go buy Oreos. It did not do anything direct that way. But I've talked with so many LGBTQ youth who love that and showed it to their parents. And so that's a way, where they're Oreos. So we're just like, oh, Oreos is great, but at the same time, they have one of the best employee resource groups for LGBTQ people. They are doing stuff year round. Lady Gaga cookies didn't wait until June. They put those out in February. They do these campaigns year round. And then they, again, also try to make sure that people know about the, their LGBTQ executives, that those people do have pathways to the top. They're communicating about those people, about their campaigns, about, why they support LGBTQ rights, and they're not, and they're not doing anything negative on the other side in the name of profit. So I think, when you really do get stuff, you can, really just amplify what you're doing by continuing to share those stories. In that particular case, that got so much media because it's just this little short film, right? It was easy for people to embed. It was easy for reporters to just, do coverage of it. And it just it wrote the story for you, so you really didn't have to do very much, and it got great coverage and stuff. So I just think like a brand has an opportunity to communicate, and they can do it a lot of different ways, but this is a really good one when it doesn't look like you're selling to us, but you are telling us. And that's just one of their ways that they're communicating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And great example. And I'm curious, were you able to get any of the Lady Gaga cookies? I'm just curious what they were like.
I did. Oh, I won't eat them. They're collector's editions. They're sitting on my shelf, but I did finally get some. Yeah. I
was wondering what flavor they were. I had no idea.
I know. They're pink. I don't know. It's great too, because, again, I want to bring Oreos in. I want them to be one of my clients. So I want, I'm a fan, but yeah, it's great. Vans did something great this year too. Not a client as well, but I will say our client Bubbly has been amazing. They, in 2020, while everybody was pulling out of the LGBTQ market, which happened, advertisers pulled out during the pandemic and scaled back, like we weren't worth marketing to during a pandemic. So Bubbly leaned in, and they were like, no, we're going to go all in. And they did campaigns during June, during Halloween, during the holidays. And they were amazing. We worked with them on it. So our crew worked with them. And we had an all LGBT crew, all LGBTQ cast. The videos, again, kind of, just took on a life of their own. We didn't have to pay for PR for them. They just went out and were broadly, lauded. And then they came back with this Bring New York City nightlife campaign back. And that the first thing they did was give, 20 grand to Henrietta Hudson's, which is one of the last lesbian bars in the country. So they gave real money to them. They included them in the campaign visuals, and then they're working with nightlife people in different cities to elevate their stories and help bring back nightlife to those places. This is a non-alcohol brand doing that. That is amazing.
That's great. And we are bubbly drinkers, so now I feel much better about the
product. I know, me too. I was like, I drank bubbly before we got the campaign, so I was just like, when we got it, I was like, yes.
So that's interesting. So I'm curious, because you talk about these brands as your clients. Now, I know that you work as CEO and also publisher. So can you explain a little bit more about your role and, just how that kind of works when creating campaigns? And I know everything is about, especially in the publishing community, is about bringing in income for the brand. So you're able to, be viable, keep rolling, and do different things.
We as a company have a responsibility, really that is, that goes sort of beyond. So we, we're here year round, and our responsibilities are for our employees and our customers. And our customers are readers first, our ad clients, our content partners. So, and we do take an activist role with them, all of those people as well. And advocacy role. And so we're pretty, we're pretty hands-on with folks. In my role as CEO and editorial director, I really combine two different sides. So I do combine church and state. We still keep church and state as separate as we can at the organization. But we are not big enough to have an entire content development team dedicated just to advertising and partnership sales. So our editors do work, some of our editors do work on content partnerships. For us, on the editorial side, that's a way for us to tell authentic stories we want to tell. And on the advertising, so it doesn't feel like advertising. So it doesn't feel like you're selling us stuff. It feels like for the editors, it feels like stories we would want to tell. And when we work with our partners very frequently, they're very hands off. They let us, originate the ideas, run with them, do what we want to do, and they see the final. They're very, very, very unlikely to come back and be like, no, I want you to cut that. I don't like the way you said that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that has made it very organic for us to basically, and in the LGBTQ market, you've always worked with advertisers because, I'll tell you this way back when I was at Girlfriends and Curve Magazine, which were both lesbian magazines, we would get advertisement. We'd be so great. We'd be like, oh, whole back cover still. And it'll come in and be two gay men holding hands. And we'd be like, sorry, we'd have to go back and be like, hey, I'm so sorry. I know this is the only creative you have, but this won't work in a lesbian magazine. Nobody will buy it if they see just two men holding hands. That's not enough. That will work for, the advocate. And so we would always have to work with our clients on developing content that worked. Well, that's the same for every LGBT title, basically. LGBTQ title is, we're always working with our clients to make sure that they're going to get the reward that they need from this. And so that works with branded partnerships. Me personally, so I, my CEO duties, I manage the sales team, I manage the finance and income teams on the one side, and then the editorial director duties, which, it's really the same as, being a group editor in chief or a chief content officer, chief creative officer is really what the equivalent is. But I manage and I'm really hands-on with all of the brands. We have 5 brands: Out, The Advocate, Plus, Out Traveler, and Pride. And so I really get to, oversee all of the work that's going into those. I work hands-on in production with each of those magazine titles, and it gives me a great eye because I can be intimately involved in all of the work, and I'm working alongside my colleagues. It's not something that I'm really separated from them. We're too small of an organization to have somebody who sits in a private office and just does, one job. Everybody in my company is wearing 7 hats right now. We're small enough that everybody does multiple things. There's no reason I as CEO shouldn't be working, the same way they are. So that's how my job works.
That's great. And, so unique to what you guys do, and I'm so glad that you're expanding and, continuing in this crazy media cycle. So we appreciate hearing that. And I also think that's a great opportunity too for brands and organizations to hear about other ways of getting the word out about themselves, which through branded journalism and content marketing and those sorts of things. So I'd like to talk more about, Pride Media and go a little bit back to your, Pride 365 as you were talking about that. And a lot of brands debuted campaigns surrounding LGBTQ issues around Pride Month. That's usually when they come out. And it's nice to see them, paying attention to consumers then. But how can they get your attention even beyond Pride Month? Like what makes a great pitch for your media outlets? And, where should people be pitching? Who should they be pitching to?
Yeah. Okay. So you can pitch me on anything. I answer all my emails. I still answer publicists. For The Advocate magazine, we pitch Tracy Gilchrist. Out magazine, Ed Chief Daniel Reynolds. Pride, Taylor Henderson. And Out Traveler, Plus is Neil Broverman. Out Traveler is Jacob Anderson-Minshall. And we pitch the editors directly. Those are all ed chiefs. And you can pitch any one of us. Some of us are more responsive to emails than others. Here's what we see that people do wrong. Okay, so in June we get millions. I'm not exaggerating. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but basically we get tens of thousands, I feel like, emails. And so many of them from publicists start off with the phrase, "Are you doing anything for Pride Month?" Right? And I'm like, get a grip, learn who we are before you pitch us, right? So, it's formulaic. And I feel really like a lot of editors are just going to delete that right away because it's like, of course, but we're not doing anything special for Pride Month because basically we are queer all year round. So, you don't need to pitch it. In fact, I would tell you, stop pitching us at Pride Month. your story in Pride Month is going to get subsumed, overwhelmed, and not read by readers, because every other thing is about Pride that month. But if you're looking at LGBTQ community, we are looking for good stories year round. Mm-hmm. So whether you are showing us, whether you're pitching executives in your company to write about, remember each of our issues has the, Out 100 is the 100 most, celebrated LGBTQ folks of the year. The Advocate has People of the Year. Plus Magazine, which is for people living with HIV, has People of the Year. Everybody has gift guides. Like, think about these things that can be, if you're pitching your executives, think of those people. If you're pitching products, just those are year round, but they can be targeted. Pitch us Mother's Day, pitch us Father's Day, Valentine's, etc. But remember that we have long lead magazines too. So if you've got a digital, you've got a drop, and you're like, hey, it's going to drop in 7 days. Well, I'm never going to get that in the magazine for you, so think about the timeliness, think about the pitch. But, if you're pitching us brand, products or brands, like, tell us a compelling story, tell us the queer aspect of it right away, or the trans aspect, or tell us the element that speaks to us, tell us the story quickly and in a slug. And don't frame it as like, you need to get this up in June. Talk about this year round. I think this is one of those things where we really, again, people really make the mistake of bundling everything in June, and you're going to get so much more bang for your buck if you've got a story coming out in November, like you really are. So we can amplify it in different ways. We can give it more coverage, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially because if that's your intended audience, especially, as a brand or an organization, then, that's the audience that's going to be there all year round. So
yeah. So I think that's a mistake. People pitch us like we're People magazine or Time magazine. And maybe for those, you have to really play that up in June, but not for us. If you've got a LGBTQ plus story, issue, person, product, or product you think our market would like, because, we cover regular products. They're not gay products. I just had a whole thing raving about Rome luggage. That hasn't, there's not a gay angle necessarily, but I just love the luggage, and it has a aesthetic I think works for us. So yeah, I think that's part of the thing. Knowing us is a really good way to get into our things.
Yeah, that's great. And another thing about Pride, everybody had a great time honoring Pride this year, as people were getting vaccinated and able to go out as opposed to in 2020. But however, most people should know that Pride is about more than parties and parades. And, as you're saying, it's more than just the 1 month. So, as you were saying, a lot of brands pitch you in June, but what is the best way for brands and organizations to keep Pride going, 365 days a year? And not just having to do with pitches or products or those sorts of things, but even within their own organizations.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think, again, I think that, yeah, we're as a movement, we're at the point where people are asking, oh my God, did we protest at Stonewall, Black Cat, Compton's, et cetera, just so that we can, just so we can buy t-shirts with a rainbow on it at this point, so there has to be more important stuff. So if you want to support LGBT folks and you want to be in on this market, first of all, stop donating to people who are doing it wrong. Again, CVS Health had their nice white heart logo rainbow tee. But, in 2019, they gave money to the Texas senators who sponsored that bill banning trans parents from getting their kids gender reaffirming medical care. So CVS is doing it wrong. I hate to call them out, but it's kind of that thing where we have to say, if Walmart has given $30,000 to Arkansas lawmakers who helped pass the bill that bars gender affirming treatment for trans youth, do we really want to celebrate their Pride and Joy section that they launched with all their Pride products? We don't. And it's like, one thing is, first of all, stop doing bad things for our community, because we no longer can support that. And then, so giving money to politicians working against LGBT causes is no longer acceptable, no matter how much money you give to queer people. Like, it just, it just isn't. So we're going to put the line down there. And the deal is too, in the 1980s, you would put, if you just acknowledged us, we were thrilled. Those companies in the 1980s and early 90s that came out in support of us, like Absolute, we would not have an LGBTQ magazine industry without having Absolute support in the 80s and 90s. But at this point, we have to go beyond giving, go beyond just selling rainbow products. Give a portion of proceeds to LGBTQ charity is great. Do more in a way that shows real depth of impact. That's working or engaging with those communities, and making sure that your own, again, making sure your own company is providing these safe spaces, equal resources, and real action to support LGBTQ employees first. Visible resource groups is a good start, and and promoting paths that goes the good way. Right now, also, I'm asking to make a stand on this sort of anti-trans backlash that's very much an issue right now. So we've had 31 states that have introduced 100 bills meant to, in many ways, like take away the civil rights of transgender people and non-binary people. And it's terrifying. I live in one of those states. So I'm the CEO of the largest LGBTQ media outlet in the country. And I could lose my rights at any time. My husband of 31 years is transgender, and we transitioned from a lesbian couple to a husband and wife about 16 years ago. We both still ID as queer. But, if he dies, his family can contest my inheritance, since the state doesn't recognize him as a transgender man, so we aren't protected. So it's like, if you think about stories like that's, that somebody with my great privilege, can be in a situation like that. That's where other people are. At this point, we really want companies to take a stand and follow the lead of some of them that have done it really well, and boycott states that are doing this. Pull your business out of states that are having such a backlash against our people. Consider the state of California has a number of states it will no longer do business with that are ones that are doing these anti-trans and anti-gay things. So at first, look at ways in which you can support the real issues we're facing. There's an epidemic of violence facing not just trans women, but also gay men right now. Big backlash there. There are health issues that, for marginalized people. There's so many issues. Pick one, get involved, show some support in a meaningful way, and your story will go all year round, just that way. And I say too, for me personally, come into LGBT community. Don't put all your energy into People magazine and your local newspaper or whatever it is you're doing. Come to us. We're the people with a guaranteed queer readers, guaranteed, and we know how to tell your story. People come to us for these stories. We tell stories with a depth and breadth and diversity that you are never going to see in mainstream media, no matter how much we are successful there.
No, that's great. And too, thinking about it on a personal level, these are folks who might be your colleagues or your neighbors or, your friends, obviously. But, they're having some struggles out there. So if you're not supporting them in your personal, daily life, then, that you're never going to see that support on a grander level. So I think that's great and appreciated. And I can't believe we've almost ran out of time, which is because that went by super fast.
I talk a lot.
No, this is wonderful. And I hope more people can view this and after we're done with this and, get some ideas from here on how to appeal to the LGBTQ plus community. One quick question before we leave, which I think is very important and I'd love to hear your opinion on. As you're saying, it can be tough out there for young adults in the LGBTQ plus community, depending on their, immediate support circle and their family and their friends and where they live and all those sorts of things. And a lot of them look to go into the communications field, whether it's, PR or journalism or broadcast or creative field, anything, law, whatever. But what advice would you give, especially from your own experience, about those looking to go into the communications field, to write about their experiences or, other things that are going on?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, it's so much better than it was when I was first a young journalist coming out. I remember there just weren't very women in the newsroom, and when I was in New York and working in mainstream media, I was told you couldn't be out and keep your job. It wasn't considered objective to be queer. And when I discovered LGBTQ media, everything just made so much more sense to me. I could combine advocacy and activism with real journalism and speak to that audience. So I'm always singing the praises of working in LGBTQ media in that way because I found a home there. But I will say things are different now. If somebody tells you you can't have your job, you can't be out, you could just sue them. That is illegal now. So, I mean, there are different ways, depending on where you are, I should say that. But you can make a discrimination claim, in that case. I would say, and this and journalism, both, be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself. People are embracing people right now. So it may not seem like it's happening depending on where you live in your small town, but face it, if you're going into journalism, you're moving away from your small rural town unless you're going to be at the newspaper. So you're going to probably go, it's a kind of it's a pathway. You end up going to larger cities. In those larger cities, I see people embracing such diversity. And that's diversity across gender expression, across race, across, gender ID, orientation, etc. So bring your whole self because that's going to help you. I'd also tell you to don't get stuck up on what your college degree needs to be. I would get you to think about and also don't feel like if you don't have a college degree, you can't be in this industry, because that's BS too. Because I know lots of journalists who didn't finish college. I didn't finish college. By the time I finished my college, because I did an adult completion program at the very end, by the time I finished college, I was already editor-in-chief of a magazine. So don't let the obstacles people tell you stop you, but do get good at what you do. Do learn how to get good at what you do.
Great. Thank you for that message. And, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
An amazing inspiration for so many. And I'm sure everyone, really appreciates your opinion and also the great, some of the great tips that you gave in terms of communicating with the media. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us today. Thank you again, Diane, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I'd like to remind everybody about our Platinum PR Awards that are coming up. We have another deadline coming up this Friday. If you've done some awesome work in the PR and communications field, give it a try. I'll put the link in the chat there, and you guys can see what awesome different categories you can apply to, and we love seeing all the great work that comes in every year. So give that a whirl. And again, thank you all for joining us. We're going to be back on August 25th with another great LinkedIn Live. We're going to have the Red Cross, PR representatives from the Red Cross coming to talk about all the crazy weather and different things that are going on this year. Wildfires, just a lot. They're a busy group, so we're really grateful that they're going to be on with us August 25th. So thank you all. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys then, and everybody stay well.